Hello and welcome to Tangerine Sky Studio. I'm Cynthia Miller. I'm just going to show you my inspiration for today. We're going to paint this autumn wreath. All these beautiful colors. I love the way this one turned out. But I just want to show you part of the studio, which is part of my inspiration. And that's what it's doing today. It started out a little bit foggy this morning, but it usually sort of shifts to the other end of the inlet and away it goes. So let's
Okay, let's get started with this autumn wreath. I'm going to be using my hake brush here. It's quite a large, thick brush, and I like it to put on water. As you can see, I'm just going back and forth, and it doesn't take long for the paper to absorb the water. You want it to be on there evenly. I'm now putting on some favorite yellow of mine, and I'm just making a nice background. I wanted to have sort of a combination of the golden rich colors of autumn, and the background seems to be the best way to bring this through. So just playing with it a little bit to get it to where I want it to be. And then I do take it to the blow dryer just to make sure that it is dry before we start. And I'm wiping the outsides of the tape that I've got around this piece of paper. I think it's important to keep that dry. It's important to tape it down when you're doing this project specifically, but important to keep that dry. And I'm adding a little bit more of a green color and just dabbing it right on the wreath, giving it that round look, coming in with some red, and then using my tissue to dab up some puddles, and it leaves quite an impression too. These are the brushes I'm using, 2 and 4. They're fairly small, and just kind of going in to the mushroom stem right off the bat. We're going to put a little bit of, it's a gray paint, and as you can see, I'm making sure that the inside of the mushroom cap is the darkest area, and then just leaving a little bit of the paper showing through on the stem with some downward strokes. It's very simple. You don't want to paint the whole thing solid. You want it to have a little bit of dimension there. Now what I'm going to do is put some masking fluid on the caps of the mushroom and of all the mushrooms, and in just little dots. And what will happen here is this will dry, and once it's dry, it's like an adhesive, and it doesn't allow any paint to go through to the paper. And so when I paint it, it will keep those spots white. Now I'm going in with some moss green here, and my design really is to have the wreath so that the moss is on the lower part of it, and it sort of gives it a nice base. It makes it realistic to think that there might be a mushroom growing there, and it really helps to give it that sort of solid appearance rather than just a mushroom sitting on a wreath. There's an actual layer of moss. And you've seen the hanging pots with the moss in the center, I'm sure. So I'm just going to fill that in, a nice moss green. If you don't have a moss green, you can mix a green with a brown. And I'm outlining the little twigs here now that have the rose hips on them, and basically just preparing the stems so that I can just go in there and fill in the little rose hips. I'm going to be using a nice bright color. I've toned my cadmium orange down just a touch with some burnt sienna. And if you don't have a burnt sienna, you could use any brown, but just a touch, just enough to make it look a little bit rusty. And I know rose hips are usually quite red, but I didn't want them to look like berries. I wanted them to be sort of that rusty red color. So we're just doing tiny little teardrop shapes, and we're leaving a little bit of white in the center. So it's, pretty straightforward how we do the shapes of these rose hips. And as I go back and touch them up, I'm giving them a darker tone right where the rose hip meets the stem. and it gives it a little bit of a 2-3 tone there if you've got a white center, or at least a white highlighting spot, and then those two shades of the darker tones of orange red, rusty orange. And we can go back in there later with a pen and sharpen those up a little bit too. The next part of this is the leaves, and this is again a combination of colors. This one is the cadmium orange, really deep, rich orange color, and I use that on a couple of leaves for the background. And then what I've done with most of these leaves, there's 6 or so of them, put on a nice yellow ochre first. While the leaf is still wet, I go in with a moss green, and then while it's still wet from that, I go in with the red and let that red kind of blend in its application to the outline of the leaf. When you use the red, and it kind of just blends in nicely. So practice that on your leaves, coming in with the yellow and then the green, let those blend a little bit, and then coming in with the red along the edges, and just let the water kind of mix and the colors mix into those beautiful autumn leaves that we know every year. They adorn our neighborhoods, fall on our yards, and we rake them up, and the smell and the look of them is just it's just so divine. It really is. I love this time of year. So this is a really good project to paint if you're kind of not really into the Christmas theme yet, or you prefer these colors, or they just sort of just seems a little bit more appropriate for what you're looking for. It's a lovely composition that gives you lots of freedom to paint those leaves whatever color you like. Perhaps your leaves are more orange, perhaps they're more yellow. Just play around with those colors, and the yellow, the green, and then the red to outline the veins, outline the outside. Just have fun with these leaves. And you know, it's sort of fantasy wreath, because I don't think we would actually be putting leaves onto a wreath. They would probably just crinkle up and dry in a day. So it's yeah, kind of interesting to have these fresh leaves, and poplar leaves as well, a little further up on the wreath. One more leaf there to go, so just the yellow and green and red, and make them all a little bit different. Make them all a masterpiece, we always say, but make them all a little different. I'm just touching up the stems for the berries. Got the forest green, putting in a little bit of depth into the moss. But when you put on a light color and then a dark color and then another dark color, it seems to really give it that depth. We're always looking for something to take our eyes into the center of the artwork, and to look at the little details along the way. So just give your moss that feeling of fuzziness, and a couple of different shades of the green, finishing up with more dark. I'm coming up here and again talking about fresh leaves. This would be fresh leaves in my mind. And I'm using a color called poplar yellow, and then coming in with some moss green. And again, just letting those two colors blend on the paper, just like the autumn leaves would. A lot of them, I mean, there's never ever two the same. So just letting the watercolor blend as it will give you the realistic look of these leaves. And then another one over here, poplar yellow. I've got a yellow that's actually the color of poplar leaves, and then going in there, or at least the yellow color of poplar when they're in the fall. In the fall, they're just exquisite, just this beautiful golden yellow. And then following up with the moss green to give it that depth and dimension. It highlights the yellow by bringing in the dark. Now we're meeting every week still for our paint circles. So if you're interested in joining us live, we do all kinds of interesting artwork throughout the year. We are called Paint Circles. We circle the world. There's lots of people coming from all over the place. UK, India, Australia. Just fascinating to be able to have friends from all over the world and like-minded people that know the benefits of painting and calming our mind. So I'm mixing some cadmium orange with just a touch of my sienna to make that nice rusty color, and I just find that it's such a beautiful rich color. I really do love this rust. And I like the way it's on a board. I can turn it around. It's really handy to do that. Now I'm using the red and a touch of the sienna now and doing another few of these rose hips. And remembering to leave just a tiny little bit of white in the center. And it's good if it's all kind of different shapes of that white, but just a highlight. And then what you can do is go back and with the same shade and just make it a little darker where it touches the stems. The stems will come out. We'll do those in like a gray color, sort of a black gray. I didn't want them to be black. I wanted them to be sort of like a gray black. I don't want them too dark. And then I'm finding a new color for these beautiful berries. So I'm using quinacridone rose and my blue violet. And I mix those two together, and I've been using those quite often lately because it's just such a rich, beautiful color. So this is obviously the wreath is upside down. I'm just filling in these ones at the top. Sometimes it's easier to do things upside down when it's like this. As long as you've got the base of what you're doing, you're not caught up in the shape of it. You're just putting in it sort of intuitively the way you might find it. And I quite like the way that things turn out when you do them upside down. In the bottom of the wreath, I think I did the stems first, and here I did the rose hips first, and then I filled in the stems. So it's whatever you want to do. And now I'm blending sepia mix. So I have sepia, but sepia is made up of blacks and browns. And I love the way that this is, it's a really good option for what I want to do here. Because I want the wreath vine part of it to look like it's wrapped around itself. And I've made lots of grapevine wreaths here. We've got a really cool kiwi bush here, and it also wraps around itself. So I'm going to use 3 different shades and go in and put in little dashes. I'll do one circle in one color, and then I'll go into with the second color, and place those dashes sort of a third away and make it look like they're intertwining, and then the third circle will be the third color. And it's a little bit more, it almost gives it a final look with this on it, a little bit more structure. And you know, if your circle doesn't turn out exactly perfect, don't worry about it, because there's never ever a round wreath from, you know, this thin grape vine. Maybe if you put several together, you could sort of shape it and tie it up, and but it really does sort of take on its own shape as you pull it around. You could put more leaves in if you wanted to. You could put more color, more berries, that sort of thing. But don't get too caught up in making this perfect. We're just having fun here, and as I mentioned before, this is really good to just be quiet in a quiet space and paint, create something. Let your mind be more focused on what the paint is doing and what the brush is doing, and good time to let your cares and your worries just melt away. So I'm using this beautiful color again to figure out how to do the mushroom. And what I'm doing is just a real red color over top of where I place the masking fluid. So I'm going to put the paint on top of the masking fluid. It's completely dry, and then I'll let the paint dry completely, and then I'll be able to sort of smudge off those little masking fluid spots, and it will be white spots left on the paper. So this is a really bright red. If you have alizarin red, that would be good too. The adhesive is great, but you don't want to rub it too much while you're putting the paint on. You just want to be light touch, really, is I think good advice. It's really a deep pigment too, so you want to just take every little brush stroke seriously. The two mushrooms that we're touching, I just did one at a time, and then I let it dry, and I'm just doing the second one here. Now if you have a black artist pen or a fine tip felt pen, this is 0.07 or 0.08, and just mark in the stems of the berries, and it'll just sort of touch it up a little bit. Now the last piece of this is the little white berries that are on the stems just by the rose hips, and I just go in there and do sort of a group of 3. And I'll just give you a close-up here. You can see the gouache white berries, you can see how the moss is fuzzy, you can see the shadows on the white spots on the mushrooms. All these little details help to bring reality to it. And you do not add water to gouache. You want it to be right from the tube. Now here I'm going in, the red has completely dried, and I would suggest using your hair dryer to give it that last little blast. I'm going in there with the white gouache, which is like an opaque paint, and it covers up any imperfections there as well. So if there's a little bit of red that's smeared or whatever, you can touch it up with the white. And what I did was go in with a tiny bit of black and put a shadow on those white spots. And I really think that helps give it a little bit of dimension as well. So I hope you have fun with this. We really enjoyed doing this, and as I said, it's the colors, it's the represents the autumn to me. So have fun, have a good week. Talk soon.